Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we're talking about who wore Sam Winchester best. Sam's been repossessed more than a cheap Ford. We're going to talk about all the other Sams we've seen over the years and what a brilliant job Jared Padalecki did in portraying that. But first, let's have our panelists introduce themselves. Laurena?
Hi, I'm Laurena Aker. I am the author and editor of the book Fan Phenomenon, The Twilight Saga. I'm also the co-editor-in-chief of the Winchester Family Business Supernatural fan site.
Michelle?
Hi, I'm a lecturer at Northern Kentucky University, and I teach public speaking and popular culture.
Cool. Carole?
I'm a longtime fan and a fanfic writer. My fic can all be found on AO3 under Firesign10, and I'm on Twitter at true_Firesign10.
And as Gail C. Martin, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future, post-apocalyptic, and more. As Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my contemporary worlds are places that I think Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home, just past the salt. So let's talk about, there was the comment made about Lucifer wanting to wear Sam to the prom, and hence, all these other comments from that. But Sam really does get a lot of opportunities to show off his acting skills by being possessed, hexed, controlled, you name it. Where do we want to start? Laurena?
I'm going to start with the most obvious one. First, I'll give you a little bit of trivia, just to tease our audience, our viewers. I went through all of the seasons of Sam, and I found an alternate Sam in everything except 6 seasons. So there were 9 seasons where he was somebody else. And I'm going to be curious through our whole discussion of the panel if I missed some, so I can get the number down of the number of seasons that don't have alternate Sam. So the most obvious one is Samifer. In season 5, the end, when he was Lucifer in that white suit, holy cow, that was just phenomenal acting. And Jared tells the story of how he was wiped out before that episode, went to Hawaii, got all rested up, came back, just raring to go, and knocked it out of the park with that episode, with that portrayal of Sam being possessed as Lucifer. So,
and then he picked back up 10 years later as if it had only been a few days, and went slipped right back into the portrayal seamlessly in that really chilling vision in the red bunker.
Right.
Atomic Monsters.
Also commenting on how pretty Sam's hair was with the glow behind him, not realizing who that glow was.
I kind of call that one alternate universe Sam, because it wasn't in that all grayed out AU, but it was a vision that Chuck put in his mind of an alternate ending or an alternate Sam. So that's my alternate universe Sam.
Okay. What stands out to you, Michelle? Who's your favorite first not Sam?
Favorite first not Sam has got to be Meg. And is that the first time we see Sam like totally possessed by someone else? And just the way that it was portrayed, and just the sinister nature of Meg coming through Sam in that. And then, when he has Joe tied up and, my daddy shot your daddy in the head sort of thing. And it really highlights just the nastiness that we saw in Meg in the first couple seasons. And then, obviously we see her kind of mellow out throughout the rest of the seasons. But yeah, that's really the one that sticks out to me. And also because she played Sam really well. I think that's another thing, because that's one of the cases where we have the possessor acting like the possessee, and it even fools Dean for a bit. So that's my
Who
take.
played Joe said that every time they did another take of that shot, Jared came at it from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that was just such a powerful scene.
Mm-hmm.
That
He
was
played bad really good.
season 2. And I think it took us all by surprise because we weren't as indoctrinated to people being possessed and being tricked by, someone acting and it wasn't themselves. And that was an out of the park acting job as well by Jared.
How about you, Carole?
Well, certainly I agree. The Meg portrayal is just stunning. It's a shock to us because we didn't know it could happen. It's a shock to us because Sam is at that point, especially because he's like a little more, not more innocent. I mean, he's grown up in the life, but he's not as hardened as Dean and everything. And to see him then be so chillingly cold in comparison to the warm, fuzzy Sam at that point we were more used to, was the contrast was terrific. It's hard. I love Samifer. I love Solus Sam, and there too, he faked Dean out for a little while, and Dean started feeling something might be off, but he faked him out for a little while, and he was like, yeah, you caught me, so what? And he was just very casual about it. And I liked the unstudied nature of that. It was so close to Sam, and yet we could always tell that it wasn't Sam. So that was certainly good. He's got a couple one-offs where we have Gary and Swap Meet, which is really pretty much for laughs, but it's great. Yes, Crystal, I would love to have the sex with you. I mean, he's just that little nerdy kid so well. And Hunter Corp, where he's just, there, it's sacred. And his mannerisms when he's drinking the beer and he hates it. And he conveys so much with very little. I mean, he can go out there and do it big, but he can do it very, very small and subtle, and yet make worlds of difference. So kudos to Jared on the nuances of these different personas.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Swap Meet situation because he was playing both versions of himself most of the time. There was Gary Sam, who was, takes the dominatrix home. And then there was Sam trying to talk the other two out of really calling the demon, and you don't know what you're getting into, and you really don't know what you're handling. And I love there's a fan fiction coda to that episode where when Dean tells Sam about what's her name at the bar, Sam calls Gary and said, did you wrap it up? Did you use a condom? I just need to know. And blisters Gary about.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Man, she comes in. Sam doing?
She comes in and all that. I just watched it today. I watched a bunch of these scenes today. Man, she comes in that shiny patent leather with the riding crop. It's a riot.
Yeah. Well, now Carole brought up a number of Sams. Anybody have any thought on those? Any other thoughts on Sola Sam or Hunter Core Sam? I did love Hunter Core Sam. What is it with socks with these guys? Neither of them wore socks with their loafers.
Well, no, Jensen as Hunter Corp Dean, Jensen had Argyles on.
Oh, he did. Okay.
He did. Sam did not have socks, but Jensen had the Hunter Corp Dean had Argyles. So. Hopefully he wore them when he drove the Impala.
Hopefully, yes.
Well, I liked Hunter Core Sam and Dean. I think because it added levity to a season that was otherwise just, horrifically heavy and tragic and everything else, So they did the spoiled trust fund, effeminate boys so well. They just had so much fun with it. And I think partly because they knew they weren't going to have a lot of episodes left that were going to be fun. So to play them against themselves, that really took a lot of experience. But, you know, of course, they had that in their bag of tricks. But yeah, that was a great one.
How did they both fit into that Fiat? Like how did that even work?
Oh, it's too funny. They probably took the back seat out. It was a stunt Fiat.
Yeah, my husband is Sam's height, and having gone car shopping many, many times, there are some that are just like, nope, might be cute, great gas mileage, can't sit. You know, because if your head's bumping into the ceiling, you can't extend your legs, it's just a non-starter.
And you mentioned Soulless Sam as well. That was brilliant. I think, again, bringing the viewers in and not knowing what was going on or what was wrong with him, and he just was able to turn on a dime. And the episode where he gets his soul back and wakes back up, and he's just back to the innocent kid of you know, hugging everyone and I'm hungry, I could use a ham sandwich type of thing. Yeah, that was really made that season, that half of the season.
I don't know that it's not necessarily a possessed Sam, but it's an alternate Sam in terms of the Sam in the Jinn dream in What Was Not and Never Will Be.
Oh, very good.
Here we see potentially if Sam had never gotten pulled out of Stanford. There he is living his apple pie life with Jess, graduating from law school. They're going to get married. But he and Dean aren't close. And Dean has obviously not done well without Sam's counterbalance because he's not exactly an upstanding citizen. And there's, you know, I thought that Jared did a really great job in being that kind of distant, preppy, emotionally stunted lawyer, who then in the end still says, you're my brother. If you're going to go do something stupid, I'm still coming with you.
Yeah.
After everything.
Yeah, it was great to see that. That's like what we see with Smith and Wesson, where once again, they're not connected. They're not close. They don't know they have anything in common. And yet by the time they are wrestling with Sanderson's ghost and finally get rid of it, that they look at each other and say, wow, that was really something. And they acknowledge that it has created some bond between them. And even Zachariah gets a little frustrated because he's like, you know, you see this is what happens every time. So, you know, it's another mirror instance in that case where despite the seeming distance between them, they always find their way to each other, you know, and that they are a unit.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask anybody else want to weigh in on that.
I was going to pick another one that's my favorite.
Go ahead.
Broken Wall Sam. This is after Soulless, he gets his soul back and Cass breaks the wall in his head. The brilliant acting, the way they cold start that to Sam running around and not sure he's in the, you know, crossing railroad tracks. You don't know what's happening to him. You don't know he's sleep deprived. You don't know what's going on. And to have that that's a brilliant episode. I think that's The Man Who Knew Too Much. Boy, oh boy, that's absolutely brilliant. Not only in Sam playing three or four versions of himself, sometimes against himself, but the tension and the suspense in one with the utter brokenness and defenselessness and just having given up of the last one, to be able to not only portray a different aspect of your personality, but of your emotions, to go to a different emotional spectrum. That's one of my favorite episodes. And I think it's because of what I call broken walls, Sam.
As you mentioned about how at that point you have Sam playing against Sam because of his different psyches and emotions and stuff. To go back to Samifer, of course, we have the clear cut, nice, the white suit, which is already a stunning portrayal. But there's also that scene in Swan Song where we have Sam is now hosting Lucifer, and yet is talking to Sam in the broken glass and the broken mirrors in that Detroit apartment. So you have, they're having this dialogue between them, and the difference just in his facial expressions is so manifest. I mean, Samifer has this very calm kind of air, whereas Sam is like still fighting and he's angry, and that scene, I always remember the white suit scenes, but I always forget about that scene. And I watched it today and I'm like, man, that is just amazing acting. He's just playing off himself and it's sensational.
Along those lines, when we have demon blood possessed Sam, so it's kind of Lucifer, Samifer light, I guess, and you see adjacent, and you see this almost subtle change. Was it throughout season 4? What was it, 4? Yeah,
4 or 5.
So we see this subtle change in Sam throughout season 4 as he's becoming more and more, and then there was that episode where we start seeing him as he's withdrawing, and it's like, oh, okay, so there was something going on, and it almost, especially for me, seasons 3, 4, and 5 are my favorite seasons, and so when I go back and rewatch them, and just seeing the signs and the symptoms of either addiction and or withdrawal in Sam during those times, it's haunting almost, because it's one of those things where it's, if you are a recovering addict, you see those traits, or if you are an addict, you see those, oh gosh, I understand that feeling, and it's fantastic, but it's also terrifying at the same time.
I thought
that's how I feel about, oh, go ahead, Laurena.
I was going to say, I thought that was a great study of, as you said, addiction, because the whole time I was following that story, I was kind of on Sam's side. He really wanted to exorcise the demons without killing the host. And I did not understand why Dean was so against Ruby that whole time. And it really pulled me in. I don't think I really understood the addiction part until he reprised the role in My Bloody Valentine. That's when you saw how much of an addiction it was to me. That's when I saw it. I really didn't even understand the power of the addiction, I didn't think, when I was watching it the first time, as you said, in like 4 and 5. And, I really didn't even get it then. I was still on his side the whole time. And it wasn't till later I was like, oh, wow. Yes, when I'll take that back. When they locked him up in the panic room and, he was going through withdrawal. Yeah. Then you saw how badly he was addicted. But up till that point, I was like, I don't see a problem here. What's everybody's problem? What's everybody's hang up? And when they locked him up, I'm like, oh, that's how bad it got.
It kind of as a footnote to the addiction thing would then be, he's already been clean. He's already been detoxed. But in the episode, is it the one where they meet death and he gets locked, Sam is locked in the bathroom?
Yeah, I think that's
Blood Valentine.
Oh, that is, okay. And you see him, he finally realizes he's going to have to do this, and he's being impelled no, is that the one with famine?
Mhm.
Okay. And, he's got the power of famine is working on him, but for him, it's not food or anything. It's the demon blood. And he snarls and turns, and he's just feral. His mouth is smeared with blood. And, right then and there, he has gone right back into that almost demonic state because of that. And he's like, wait your turn, and that was, that's clearly way past the warm Sam that we all know and love. And I think for Dean, some of it might just be at that point, Dean is still very kind of black and white. He's not quite the Dean with the grayer visions that we see later on, where he can even conceive of. I mean, look at Crowley. They might bicker about him, but they can accept that he can help them. But season 4 Dean was not there yet, and all he knew is that Ruby's a demon and she's bad. End of story. So that kind of plays into that.
And then by the time we hit Swan Song in the end of season 5, before Sam accepted Lucifer, he downed a bunch of demon blood. And so that, transition of him accepting, okay, this is what I need to do. And then really, I mean, that Sam that we see in the mirror that you were talking about before, in the splintered mirror, that's still the demon blood Sam. That's the feral, the angry, all of that. And so really Sam had to lose himself multiple times during Swan Song, not only to the blood,
Right.
but then to Lucifer. And then when, he's pulled out of that, when he's beating Dean to a bloody pulp, that just shows the strength between the two brothers and baby herself too. And just to see that's just how, I guess, impactful it is. It rises above the addiction, it rises above the possession. And
right, it's because of his bond with Dean and with baby that he's finally able to grab the tiger by the tail. Because when he's alone, he can't do it. They're in that apartment and he can't do it. But when he's with Dean and baby, he's able to do it and, wrestle him into the pit.
I think one of the ones that fascinates me, and it plays out over the seasons, is grieving Sam. So we see Sam and in the beginning losing Jess, and he gets kind of snarky teenager almost still, where he's short with Dean, and he's, I'm gonna go back. What does he think he's going back to? It's like he hasn't quite processed that he can't go back to that life. But after Jessica dies, he turns that corner into some vengeance, but he's still very controlled. He's still very buttoned down. And then we get to Mystery Spot, and Dean dies over and over again. And it's not until Wednesday, the first Wednesday, when we see Sam go completely off the rails. And that's the whole Travis Bickle in a skirt, Full Metal Jacket comment that the Trickster later makes. But we get an idea of what Sam's capable of, and that there's a darkness inside this guy that is way deeper than we've gone yet. And then when each time we lose Dean, Sam kind of loses some humanity in response. So when we see Sam after No Rest for the Wicked and Dean's dead, he's drinking himself to death in a crumbling house until Ruby actually saves his life by refocusing him on vengeance, or he wouldn't have been around for Dean to come back to. And so we see he's just given up. But then after Purgatory, even if you buy into the Amelia arc, he did a little better by not going quite that far off the rails. He tried to move on, didn't make any world-ending deals. I still have to look for him. But here's a guy with most of a Stanford education who goes back to fixing air conditioners previously had gone back to bartending, well, not even bartending, back bar.
Yeah.
And I think in all of those grieving incarnations, because he was really grieving even in like Good God, Y'all, where he's separated from Dean. He doesn't know if they'll ever get back together again. When he takes those positions that are so far beneath what we know he's capable of, we get an idea of what Sam really thinks of himself. He's not seeing himself as that Stanford almost lawyer. He's not seeing a whole lot of worth in himself. And that keeps playing out every time we see Sam grieving. And then, you know, we get to season 9 and season 10, and Sam's just willing to burn the whole place if it gets Dean back. He doesn't care. He's gonna tempt somebody into selling their soul. He's just had it.
I think that's one of the things that I struggled with, because I'm very much a Sam person, and I struggled with his transition there with Demon Dean. So, you know, all the other times we saw when he lost Dean, he's like, all right, fine, you know, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm just going to give up. And then we have, like you said, he's tempting a guy to sell his soul. He's you know, tracking people down. He's, you know, doing all this sort of stuff. And it's like, whoa, like the fact that, you know, the chance that Dean is coming back, is that enough to drive him into such desperate measures? Or, I mean, even kind of, I guess kind of with Mystery Spot, because he was constantly hunting down the trickster to, you know, hey, bring him back. And I don't know, it's like if there's a glimmer of hope, then he goes feral. But if there's no hope, then he's just, I'm done.
Well, I thought that in season 9, Sam was so driven by having disappointed Dean in quote unquote not looking for him, that he was willing to burn the world as opposed to not disappointing Dean again. When Dean dies, when Sam dies, Dean gets self-destructed. When Dean dies, Sam burns the world.
I've actually never realized the way you just traced it through all the different times that he experienced death and how he reacted. That's a fascinating personality profile slice, to just look at grieving Sam and take it through all of the seasons, all of the deaths, all of the experiences, all of the different circumstances, and bookend it from how he reacted to Jess, which was his first, well, you know,
And Dawn.
Yeah, and keep going from there all the way to the end, because one of the Sams that I identified was the old man mortal Sam, where he let Dean die in 15 in Carry On. He let him die. I mean, he didn't have a choice, but I mean, he didn't bring him back, is what I want to say.
He accepted it.
Right. He accepted the death. He didn't try and burn the world down to bring him back. And then you have a Sam that, to me, seemed empty for the whole rest of his life. Yes, he had a wife. Yes, he had a child, raised the child, was very proud of this boy, but he looked very empty when he got in the Impala behind the wheel. So you have somebody that's no longer destructive, but accepting is almost too generous a word. He is accepting, but it's almost like he gave up. So it's kind of a sad acceptance.
He was just waiting. He just kind of waited out the rest of his life, and he filled it, but he was still just waiting to finally get to the end and be back with Dean again.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, I told you I wouldn't kill myself, but it doesn't really mean I'm still alive. And I think it's interesting that we see a wedding ring on Sam's hand at the end, but other than Blurry Woman on the porch, when we see all those pictures on the mantle, I've never seen a family picture with a wife in it. So was it a baby mama? Was it someone who was around for a little bit and then died or left? People continue to wear wedding rings for many reasons, sentimentality, or I just don't want anyone hitting on me. but I thought that was very interesting that she's not present
Mhm.
in that,
Right.
you know,
She
little
did not,
Mhm.
she didn't have a big space in his life, whoever she was.
Mhm.
No,
Oh.
no.
So then
Yeah.
going off of that, so, going on the fact that if Amelia was actually real, and is that where that storyline would have ended up? So, he lost Dean, didn't think he was coming back. Is that where is that where his post Dean story maybe kind of started? Maybe that's why we all saw, blurry wife, in the blurry woman in the corner that he's co-parenting Dean Jr. with. Is that kind of like the start of the story? And then, they started at season 8, and then season 15 is like, oh yeah, by the way, this is what would have happened if Dean would have stayed dead. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to speculate on that, because certainly in the Amelia arc, he is very passive.
Mhm.
Like there's so much confounding in that, but he is fairly passive. He's not avidly pursuing her, but he kind of just keeps staying around, which is not the same as to say I am pursuing this person or I'm working actively to be with this person. It was kind of like, well, I don't have anything else going on, and I don't have anybody else to cling to, and she's very needy because of her loss, and I'm needy because of my loss. So we'll package up all our neediness together in this unhealthy relationship.
That's how it always
Raise
struck
your
me.
hand if you've been in one of those relationships.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a proximity relationship where someone doesn't want to be alone, and they'll kind of put up with anybody who'll have them who isn't too annoying. And if both people kind of need that, it's a transactional sort of relationship, but sometimes it gets people through a bad time where they might not have made it alone. But yeah,
And we
I agree.
certainly,
And
we
maybe
certainly
that's what happened with Dean Jr. Dean Jr. just happened to be a product of that relationship, and he threw himself into raising the child instead of necessarily furthering the relationship with the woman.
we can always certainly understand why Amelia stayed with Sam. Because who wouldn't?
But she said it best to her father. She said together. So that was a very good summation of who they were at that time. Can't we fix each other together? But I like your idea about that was really just the beginning of bridge over all those years to the end when he went and found someone and had the same kind of relationship. Of course, we're cheapening the relationship. We have no idea what it was, but it, as Gail said, there wasn't a whole lot of passion that we were able to see there. I mean, he didn't seem that happy.
If she can't even be in focus in her one scene, I'm not sure there's anything to cheapen. I mean, really, we don't even have a name. It's Blurry Girl.
Blurry Woman. Mrs. Blurry Woman.
Well, and we didn't see the same kind of grief when Chuck, I never really bought into the Sam and Eileen thing, which we then find out was really manipulated by Chuck in the first place. But I thought it really kind of underscored that it wasn't real and that it was kind of Chuck's puppeteering when she gets Thanos snapped at the end, and in the next scene when they see Jack, the new god, he doesn't even ask, and did you bring Eileen back? I mean, even as a good friend, of course, he doesn't ask, did you bring Cass back? So we had this, oh, we are grieving. And they forget to mention it to the new god. Hey, before you take off, could you do me a solid? And so
you're killing me.
That was just, that would have been my first thing to ask. Can you bring my beloved back?
Yeah.
Doesn't even come up in conversation. Have a nice time with,
Yeah.
Amara.
Well, I mean, even in that case, slightly off, relationship adjacent, we had no Dean asking Jack, hey, can you bring back your third dad?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's almost that parallel between the two of them.
Mhm.
Aside from the big confessional episode, Cass had been with them for 10 years and he was Jack's third father. You'd think, can you fish him out of the empty? You think maybe?
No,
Didn't
no.
come up.
I'm gonna be
Happy.
a hands-off god.
Yeah.
So in
Oh,
terms
dear.
of grief, that was kind of a bungle, or it wasn't a solid enough connection for him with Eileen other than friendship to be that
Yeah.
torn up about. They've lost a lot of friends. I think we also saw grieving Sam not only in the episode where John dies, but in Lebanon, where he reconciles and has to come to terms with that grief. And now we see kind of mature Sam.
Yeah, that was,
John's expecting a punch, and Sam's like, "Nah, I got past that a long time ago."
yeah, for me, it's been all these years and I'm a different person than I was. Yeah.
I did like Steve Jobs Sam though. Kale Sam.
Kale Sam.
He was great for a brief moment. There's one big Sam that we haven't talked about yet though.
Gadriel.
Well, it's always
Good
been.
real. Good
Yeah,
real.
there's a lot of Sams we haven't talked about yet.
And
That's
don't
why
forget
I'm
Leviathan.
keeping track.
Yeah. But yeah, Gadriel.
For me, there's this one scene, I think it's in the bunker, where Gadriel and Sam is talking to Dean, and then all of a sudden Gadriel pops in, and you literally see Jared do one of these. Like he straightens his back, he straightens his neck, and it's just like the difference between those two characters. We had Gadriel using Sam's full height, which Sam didn't always do, and that. I don't know, like that image just sticks out in my mind. It's just like mesmerizing. It's like, oh, we are on a different page now, ladies and gents.
It's the same thing. You see that also now in the scene where we first see him with the angel glow and the silhouette of the shadow of the wings behind him. Now, obviously, of course, yeah, here he is. He's got his wings, but it's not so much even the effects of the glow and the wings. It's that same movement you see where you have Sam, and then you see him really unfurl his full height, where he's often very kind of, I'm bringing myself down a little bit so I don't intimidate people or whatever. And here, like the shoulders are back and the head is up, and the presence that he evokes at that moment. I mean, sure, the wings and the glow are great, but the presence just physically that Jared projects at that moment is really, really so different from Sam and so imposing.
Gadriel Sam was the one time, I think, when Jared changed the inflection in his voice. You get a different cadence. And I don't remember hearing that really in a lot of the others. I mean, he might have been silly when he was body swapped, or he might have been for the trust fund Sam, he might have been a little bit softer with his words, but the cadence of his words changed with Gadriel. And that was a big signal of which one, both the body straightening up and then the voice changing. And for an actor to think about controlling their voice is fascinating.
Also, the cadence is consistent across the character. I can't remember the actor that plays him outside of Sam, but both actors play Gadriel with that same kind of cadence, kind of like when Lucifer was inside Cass and you had Misha mimicking Mark Pellegrino. They're both kind of maintaining that same cadence, that same behavior, I guess. And the other actor that plays Gadriel didn't have to do that, shoulders back thing, because he was already established as that sort of character.
Yeah, they had a very formal, almost a formal way of speaking, and very measured, because they didn't have the same inflections that we do, because we're emotional, and they're angels and they're not. So they had that very measured, and you can actually hear it in Lucifer, but Lucifer is a little smoother and he's got that that honeyed tone because he wants to talk people into what he wants. But he even at that point still has that faintly measured speech. And then, Gadriel has it even more because he's had so little human contact at that point.
And we see that measured speech in Michael when he's controlling either Dean or Adam, as well as AU Michael. There's just a distance and a formality because we are, after all, speaking to all us human apes that they see it far beneath them.
Yeah, you really see it in the see it in the that consider themselves far superior, like Raphael and Uriel. They really have that, distanced formal speech. But I'm
being sullied just to even talk to you. Yeah. Well, and briefly there was Leviathan Sam shooting up the bank. That must have been a fun scene to do. Who else? Laurena, I know you have the master list here.
I'm
so
keeping the list. You have drugged Sam or wedded Sam for season 7, Time for a Wedding. And then similarly, you have Peace of Mind Sam that went to the malt shop and drank the Kool-Aid and was mind controlled and became the glasses mouth of it. So, that's what that's Sam. So both of those were mind controlled, but in a very different way, entirely different way. The Peace of Mind Sam was again just fun. That was just a funny, relaxing, and by then I think Misha had down the reactions, and Cass's reactions were just so hilarious. It almost wasn't Sam or Jared that was funny. It was Cass that was funny in reacting to what he was experiencing with Sam. So that was one where I think Sam was the straight man, just throw me the line and let me react to it somehow.
If he could throw out HE double hockey sticks, and you just better skedaddle and keep a straight face. Of course, led to the whole conversation of those of us who actually grew up with people who said HE double toothpicks or HE double hockey sticks.
Absolutely.
And rar.
I never knew anyone that said that.
You should wash your mouth out with soap.
It must just be
kind of Sam and Darren in Bewitched, almost the 1950s house, husband. Yeah.
It must be such a. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Carole.
Just that it must be such a gift that on the one hand, you get to play this character for so long that you can explore every thought, every motivation, and yet still have the experience of playing all these other personas and dimensions, just to keep it fresh and have fun. And, oh, wow, look, I get to be this, I get to do that. So what a great experience it just must be. And he's already, just to digress briefly, but we are seeing Jared doing that in his new show where he's already had a different personality, and he's just so very, very deft at it, very skilled.
One of the things that just came to my mind when you were talking about that is we had Meg possessing Sam, and as Michelle said, Meg possessed Sam was just vicious and cruel. And it made me think of the old Star Trek episode where Kirk gets, I don't even remember how, but he gets possessed by this woman who was always very upset that she didn't get to be a guy and has been done out of all these things by not getting to be a guy. And it played to every freaking misogynistic stereotype of what women are like, but we aren't, where, come on, we all know that Meg's version was a lot more realistic and not flouncing and not, acting like a snubbed suburbanite. And, what a difference 40 years makes in playing being possessed by the other gender or another gender. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
I think the last one that I had was Trials, Sam going through the trials. because he had to keep changing how beaten down he was and how, you know, he'd start staggering or he wouldn't be able to stay awake or talk. And then when you get all the way to sacrifice in season 8, and he is
A wraith.
at death's door again, because he doesn't care, because he thinks Dean gave up on him and Dean doesn't love him, and so Sam gave up on himself. So
Another angel, another vampire.
yeah, and that's not the way the trial started out. You know, it was just kind of an accident in the whole covered in dog goo thing. But as he went through it, Sam's self-doubt and self-hatred all came out, and you get back into that psychological profile that would be so fascinating to do, as when he got self-destructive. So trial Sam was staged too.
And yet trial Sam was still distinct from the hallucination Sam, when he was, you know, seeing Lucifer after the wall broke, and he was seeing Lucifer. So we managed to have a very different Lucifer from the trial Sam, where in both cases he's physically beaten down, mentally distraught, barely coping, and yet they're different.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about, for just a second, we'll talk about a happy Sam, and that's Banff Sam.
Which one? Banff.
Big ass mother for Sam.
Oh, yeah.
So I think,
okay.
where Sam,
like in Canada, I'm like, what?
oh, where Sam is like,
Gotcha.
where Sam's in total, he's on top of the situation, he's nailing it.
Yeah.
I think my two favorites are in the warehouse during Croatoan, and he's like, he and Bobby are getting everyone out of the warehouse, and he's got his gun, and he is like breathtaking in his command. And Bobby even says later he was amazing. And then one of the other ones would be where he's in the bar and all the demons are squabbling about who's going to, and he's like, nope, gotta come through me, back off.
Right.
There will be a new king of hell.
Exactly. And we don't get to see Banff Sam all that often. So when we do, it's really refreshing. And
we saw it again briefly in the episode beginning of season, was it 13, when they have gotten out of the lockdown and they're playing hide and seek with everybody.
I love that. Yeah.
Face when he says, we're the guys who saved the world, and he's just done with them.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. No holds barred. Boom.
But that is actually, that's one of the few times you see Sam actually own what they've done. Guilt and everything else, guilt and cost aside, yeah, I do know what I'm worth. We're the guys who saved the world.
Right.
And
don't F with us.
So to take this on just a slightly like PG-13 directed thing, when you were saying that he's in charge and he's on top, I immediately went to, my brain goes to these places. And other times that we see Sam that's very sure of himself and very much is in sex scenes.
Yep.
And in those sorts of scenes that he takes the more dominant position within the sex scenes. And you also see him then be more sure of himself and be more in control. And that, you know, there are those rare times outside of the bedroom where he's like, you know, yeah, we're the guys that save the world and there will be no new king of hell. And it's kind of funny just to see that, you know, early on in the seasons, we got to see dominant Sam in certain situations, and then he was able, through his own growth and strength, to take that from an intimate situation and make it much more an aspect of his personality,
which I thought was
I really admire about him too.
Somebody pointed out that, you know, Sam is usually the puppy eyes guy, except in the bedroom when he's very dominant. Dean, you'd think, would be the really dominant guy, but he's soft and gentle in the times we get to see him in bed with someone. And so it's an interesting dichotomy. Well, folks, we have explored the many faces of Sam and we're out of time. So real quickly, please go around, tell everybody again where they can find you online, starting with you, Carole.
I'm on Twitter as firesign10, and I'm all my fic is on AO3 under true_firesign10. Mind the tags.
Michelle.
You can find me on Twitter at preheatingprof.
And Laurena.
On Twitter at LSAngel2, the number 2, and at WinFamBusiness for Winchester Family Business. On Facebook, I'm Fan Phenomenon Twilight, and on Instagram, I'm Laurena Aker.
And I'm at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the rest of the social media is a variation of that. I am a regular columnist for Winchester Family Business. And most of the time you can find me here on Continual. Well, thank you so much to all of my wonderful, wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for hanging out and discussing the many faces of who wore Sam best. And thank all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual, so we'll see you online.